Fish for You here. Today coming back in with another video. If you have plecos or if you have snails, this is the video for you. We're going to go over the best foods that you can be feeding them and how to make their growing out faster and more efficient. So with further ado, let's get started.
First off, let's think about this. What do our snails, what do our plecos, what do they eat in the wild when they're not in our aquariums, right? So snails, they typically go after dying or decaying plant matter. They'll eat algae. If a fish dies, they'll eat that fish. They're opportunistic. They will basically go after anything that they can, but most of the time they're going to be eating algae or decaying dead plant matter. And then plecos, they pretty much do the same thing. They're going to be eating mostly algae. They're going to be eating green spot algae, diatom algae, things like that. So yeah, sometimes they're also going to be eating insect larvae. How can we replicate that in our home aquarium? One of the ways is by giving them plant matter, right? We don't want them to eat our plants that we put in there. We want those plants to be healthy, look pretty, and we definitely don't want algae in our tanks. I mean, it's not bad for your tank, but it's also not pretty to look at when you can't see through the glass because it's covered in algae. So what can we feed our plecos and our snails that is plant matter, but it's not going to affect our tank negatively? And it's going to give them everything that they need, nutritionally as well. Think about vegetables, right? We can feed them zucchini, we can feed them cucumbers, we can feed them squash, we can feed them green beans. We can feed them pretty much anything that you want. I wouldn't recommend peas because peas are like a natural laxative for some fish. Now, if your fish does have an issue, it's a different video, but just try and stay away from peas for that reason. Really, the two main things that I've fed are zucchini and cucumbers, and I'll alternate them because they have different nutritional facts, but we'll get to that later on in the video. The other thing I've fed is green beans, but whenever you're getting these, make sure that they are not canned, okay? You want them to be either fresh or frozen, because you don't want them to have a bunch of salt in them. You just want the vegetables to be raw. Yeah, so why should I even feed this to my fish? Like, they have wafers.
You should just be able to toss those into your tank and be done with it, right? Not necessarily.
They're gonna have ingredients in them like wheat germ meal, feeding oatmeal, wheat flour, just different types of meals that are derived from grains, right? And that's not what the plecos and the snails eat in the wild. They also don't even have calcium in them, and we're gonna get to that, but for snails, calcium is really, really important. You wanna make sure your snails are getting calcium because they have that huge shell on them, right? And we all know that the shell is like our fingernails, it's calcium. Okay, so they need a lot of that in order to form a shell. Otherwise, you're gonna see their shell is gonna start to degrade. It's gonna maybe start cracking. It's gonna get really white and just look really rough and not be good. And they're gonna live a short life because of that. This is what's inside cucumber and zucchini. These are the ones that I went with, and the nutritional facts here, now they are for humans, so we're gonna go ahead and just ignore the percentages, but this is for 100 grams of cucumber and 100 grams of zucchini, which is roughly a third to a quarter of a zucchini or cucumber. If we look at it, we can see that zucchini has basically no fat, and neither does cucumber. Now, zucchini's got a little bit more fat than cucumber, but it's still basically nothing. Like, that's really good. We don't want our fish to just be eating fat, right? We want them to be eating healthy. We want them to stay healthy, and we want them to live a full life for us so we can enjoy them the longest term possible. But if you also look at them, they have sodium, they have carbohydrates. Now, cucumbers have more carbohydrates than zucchini, but zucchini has more calcium, more potassium, and slightly more iron. So it's higher in the vitamins, which is why I alternate them. But zucchini is also slightly more expensive. So like if you're looking out to go get a cucumber, I can get mine for 89 cents. Sometimes you can get them for less than that. But you should be able to get a cucumber for less than $1. And if you only have a couple tanks you're feeding, that cucumber is going to last you a long time, like a week, right? You're going to be spending 89 cents a week versus, let's say you go get Pleco wafers. How much is that little bag? $20, $10? You're going to go through that, and it's going to end up costing you more money long term to do the Pleco wafers than it is just to go get cucumber and do it. If you're going to just go ahead and feed one thing, I would feed them the cucumber or zucchini, and they'll get a little bit of your flake as well. So that should be enough variety to keep your fish thriving just with those two things. How do I even feed this stuff, right? Like, yeah, you told me I can feed it, but what do I just take a cucumber and plop it in? Yeah, so for that, let me just go ahead and show you actually.
Okay, so to start, we're gonna need a few things. We're gonna need a zucchini or a cucumber right here. And then we're going to need our knife that we can use to cut it. We're going to need to use a pot, and you can see I did burn the pot a few times with the cucumber, so make sure you don't leave them in too long, otherwise they will mark up your pot. I've done that a few times, but we're going to go ahead and fill the pot up with some water. When we do this, we're going to make sure we use hot water, because hot water is going to boil much faster for us. So I'm going to go ahead and let that water get real hot. And once we have an appropriate amount of hot water in, I'm going to go turn that off and put it on the stove to boil. Turn the heat up all the way to high, that way it boils as fast as possible. And in the meantime, we're going to cut our zucchini. Now, when I cut my zucchini, I like to do it into little slices. It doesn't matter really how you cut it up. You can do it into long strands. I've seen people do that. The reason I like to cut mine into little chips is because it leaves more surface area for the plecos and the snails to actually eat it. You'll notice they won't eat the skin right away, maybe after a few days of it being in there, but if there's too much skin on one side, they're not going to eat from that side. So just to get more surface area, we go ahead and cut it like that. Okay, so now that we've got them all cut, we're going to add them in one by one, which is very important because we don't want them to stick to each other. We want them to properly boil, get all sides of them blanched for about 3 to 4 minutes. You're going to want to stir them up again just to make sure that they're all underwater, they're all touching the hot boiling water. This will also remove any pesticides from them while they're being blanched, as well as allowing the pieces of cucumber or zucchini to sink when you put them in the water. So it's been boiling for about 4 minutes. You see they change colors slightly. We're going to turn off the stove, grab them, and go drain them from the hot water. If you have a strainer, you can use that as well. I just use this wire fry tool that I have laying around to just go ahead, scoop them out, and place them back on the cutting board. Now, they're very hot, and we cannot put them in our fish tanks like this unless we want to burn our fish, which would not be very good. So we're going to go ahead and take those, put those on the cutting board, and then we're going to spread them out evenly so that they can cool down effectively and fast. It should only take a few minutes, about 3 minutes for them to cool down, cold enough for you to be able to put them into your fish tanks. So when you're trying to decide how many should I feed, a good rule of thumb is how many Pleco wafers do you feed? Just feed that many slices of zucchini. Come back in 2 days if there's still zucchini left over. Just feed a little bit less next time. But I go ahead and feed this every other day. Usually, if I feed it today, tomorrow, whenever I come back to it, there'll still be half left. And by the end of the day tomorrow, it'll be completely gone and ready for me to feed it again. As you can see, though, the baby bristlenose plecos love eating this stuff. This is all we feed to our baby bristlenose plecos. Our adult bristlenose, they cannot get enough of this either. The snails just absolutely destroy the zucchini when we put it in, and if you have any guppies, they're gonna tear it up as well. All your stuff is gonna love this zucchini. So just enjoy the next couple minutes of footage of these guys eating it. guys, I think that about wraps it up for this week's video. If you made it to this part in the video, go ahead, leave us a like, a comment, and we really appreciate it if you subscribe. Until next week then, flop like a fish.
I'm a flop like a fish. I'm a flop like a